in the age of social media, crisis really can come from anywhere. It might not be a call into your press office from a journalist anymore. It could be someone walking into your reception. It could be someone posting on Trustpilot. It could be absolutely anything and everywhere. And you've got to be aware of what people are saying about you, and also have that process, whether that's familiar to your social media team, familiar to any public-facing reception, customer service people. Everyone has to be aware of that crisis.
Hello, and welcome to the very first episode of the Marketing Podcast. I'm Jodie Williams, co-founder of the Marketing Pod, and I'm here with the very brilliant Ros Wisdom.
Hello.
And today we're joined by Mike and Sarah from our brilliant PR team.
Hello.
Hello.
It feels like every week there's a new headline that makes you wince a bit and quietly thank the universe that it's not your brand. Crisis feels like something that happens to other people, right up until it doesn't. So today we're asking our two experts whether B2B brands are genuinely better protected or just better at actually pretending that nothing's happening. So Sarah, can we start with you, please? You work in B2B PR every day across some pretty complex sectors, including energy, where things don't always go wrong loudly, but they do often go wrong. So what's the last headline or crisis that made you think, wow, I'm really glad I'm not handling that today?
Well, it's a really interesting question, and it does feel like we are in the age of crisis where there seems to be a different thing every single week where, Mike and I and our PR colleagues sit there and go, oh, thoughts and prayers for the press office today, that glad we're not handling that. But we're recording this as well the morning after Brooklyn Beckham went nuclear on his family. But also, just thinking of that from a brand point of view as well, it's almost like a whistleblower sort of blowing up a business brand. But there's been a few recently that I can think of in terms of, I'm really glad I'm not handling that. Probably the most recent one was all the stuff with the West Midlands Police and the Aston Villa match, and the fact that I think it's not a B2B example, but what's interesting for our clients is how they gathered the evidence to support their case and the revelation that it was an AI hallucination of a match that never existed. And it's just a real warning shot, I think, to any business approaching a crisis to verify your research, look at your sources, and don't rely on AI. So that was a really interesting one for me, certainly, as well. And then pre-Christmas we had all the stuff with the OBR and everything like that. So there's been a lot that you think, wow, yeah, interesting times, definitely.
And you guys have little catch-ups, don't you, every morning where you have a little look at what's actually
happening, yeah, and go, ooh, that we'll see how that one plays out, definitely.
Mike. No, same question to you.
Yeah, I think sort of certainly coming from the sort of political side of PR, Westminster is a fairly big source of crises. I think recently Robert Jenrick, his defection from the Conservatives to Reform, obviously they had a plan for a big splash, particularly around the May elections. That all went a bit wrong when he got ratted out or it leaked somehow. And I think it just really shows that plans often rarely survive particularly long, and you've always got to have a bit of a backup, really, and crises can come from anywhere.
Yeah, definitely.
Thank you. We've seen some very visible consumer brand go through difficult times. For instance, M&S and their cyber attack. And when that happens, everyone has an opinion. Twitter has an opinion. My own husband has an opinion. And when B2C brands mess up, it's front page news. But when B2B brands mess up, it's usually a very tense, slightly passive aggressive email chain with pretty much everybody CC'd in on it. And things then tend to play out behind closed doors. So are B2B brands actually more immune to reputational crisis? Mike, what do you think?
I think they can easily fall into a false sense of security if you're a B2B brand that you are immune from crisis when really you're not, especially if you operate in a world where everyone knows everyone. Your reputation really carries, especially in these sort of smaller sectors or very specialist sectors. You might not have the same scale as if you're M&S having a cyber hack, but you still run the risk of that your reputation can be seriously tarnished, especially if in sort of specialist sectors.
Yeah, and I think as well it's sort of a bit of a danger zone if you think, oh, we're B2B, we're not going to hit the headlines. Taking a cyber attack, that yes, it can affect your consumers, but there's going to be supply chain implications, there could be regulator implications, wider stakeholder implications as well. So there is usually a B2B angle as well to those bigger stories. And yes, so if a B2B crisis does go bigger, it might not hit sort of front page of the tabloids, but it could hit your trade press, those sort of publications that your customers are reading. So I think, to be thinking, it's okay, we can probably handle this behind closed doors. It's not a safe place to be. And you need to really think, no, actually, a crisis could hit us as well.
Do you know, that's such a good point, because actually your immediate thought goes to, oh my God, what will my customers think about this? But actually it's so much wide reaching, and including employees as well.
Yes.
Because actually the media can get to employees and get their opinion on what's going on behind the scenes as well, can't they?
Yeah, it can take one disgruntled employee and, all of a sudden you're dealing with a crisis. So yeah, definitely. B2B brands might not go as big, but it's a fallacy to think that it won't hit at all.
Fab. Going to put you on the spot a little bit. What would be, if you were to pick one, what would be the number one reputational risk that you think B2B brands face?
I can't think of one, because it totally depends on your business, your sector. Working in the energy sector, it can be something as big as a substation going down and grounding Heathrow Airport. For a construction sector, it could be something completely different. It could be health and safety or supply chain issues. So I think you need to look at it on a very business by business and sector by sector basis, and to be able to identify your top risk, definitely.
Mike, what do you think, especially working in such heavily regulated sectors? Is there one for you?
I'm going to copy Sarah and give a very sort of PR'd cop-out answer, and say really it can come from anywhere, and it's perhaps dangerous to try and predict everywhere that you think a crisis will come from, because it could literally be absolutely anything, as Sarah mentioned. But particularly in the sort of space we operate in with sort of infrastructure and energy, that if service delivery fails, a lot of people are going to be impacted. Whether people don't have water, or they don't have power, or you indeed shut down Heathrow Airport. And I think that, putting my politics hat back on, you get a lot of regulatory scrutiny. Just look at the water companies at the minute. It's the talk of Parliament, really. And you are going to face that scrutiny, even if you are a sort of a B2B business, or don't think that you are going to face the same crises. You really can.
Fab. And it sounds like, if I put myself in the customer's shoes, being prepared, to quote the great Aston Villa or the Scouts, it feels like quite a daunting task. It can feel quite overwhelming. How would businesses get started? What would be the first step that businesses should take?
I think it's doing sort of a bit of a mapping exercise. So looking at all your stakeholders, all the people that you would potentially need to communicate with in a crisis, and then overlaying that with scenario planning as well. So looking at every possible scenario that could potentially impact your business. I mean, you won't catch all of them. There'll always be a random one, but broadly you can do that scenario planning. And go through sort of the potential Q&As you would get as well, setting up your escalation process as well. It's probably not thinking that a crisis has to be something as huge as a cyber attack. It could be something as simple as
your son issuing a
6-page statement about your family, or an email in from a client or something like that just needs dealing with. But it's having that sort of robust escalation process, so you know when to bring in senior level spokespeople as well. So there's several steps that clients can take, definitely, to make sure they're a bit more prepared for it.
I think that it sounds really scary, crisis. No one wants to think about it, and also you don't have to jump straight to wargaming that the house is on fire. It's really sort of building up the processes and building up confidence first, and it's always helpful, I think, to have a sort of a fresh set of eyes on it. I'm going to sort of plug Pod here a little bit in our PR services, but having someone who has dealt with crises before come in can be really helpful, just to see perhaps where the holes are, perhaps where things can be strengthened a little bit. And again, it's not jumping straight to tearing you apart and pretending there's a crisis. It's just building up that resilience and just being prepared.
I guess doing the wargaming bit could be quite fun as well, to think of all the possible scenarios, like your HR leader and your CEO being caught at on a big screen.
I can guarantee that probably wasn't on their scenario planning, but it is now.
Oh yeah, it's in every PR sort of training package now, I think.
You're both really experienced PR people. You've worked with lots of different companies, and you have dealt with being in the middle of a crisis firsthand on behalf of customers many times. In energy, where regulation, contracts and public trust all collide, what lessons have you learned from the crises that you've been involved in?
I think don't let the void be there. I mean, there'll be a gap in information, and if you don't fill it, someone else will. Especially in the age of social media, misinformation can really spread. It's perhaps not an energy company, but obviously looking at Sweaty Betty recently went through a crisis where they were accused by an influencer of using her material and slogans without properly crediting her. There was about a 3-day gap before Sweaty Betty actually responded to that crisis, and that just allowed misinformation to spread. Suddenly everyone had an opinion, everyone had heard everything before Sweaty Betty commented. And I think sort of the big takeaways, both from that and from crises I've worked on, is don't let misinformation fill the void. You have to be prepared to act and respond.
Yeah, definitely. And I think sort of, just looking over my many years of working in PR, I think it is now just the speed at which things happen as well. That, back in the day, you get a phone call from a journalist, you'd have maybe an hour or two to turn around a statement and tweak your statement, but you haven't got the luxury of that time anymore, because as Mike said, things will be hitting social media before you're able to do that. So I think that's where, sort of harking back to what we said before, just having that, being prepared, having those lines to take is really crucial for today's crisis, definitely.
As we know, we can't ignore social media anymore as much as we'd like to, sometimes given the current news content. There was a time not so very long ago when a crisis was contained to a meeting room and then a formally issued press statement. Now it's a screenshot, it's a thread on a social, and someone saying, just flagging that.
Do you miss those days?
I do miss those days of the luxury of time.
So how has managing a crisis changed in the digital age? And what does that mean for B2B energy brands in particular?
Well, I think sometimes a mistake can be, most companies do now have a presence on social media, whether that's LinkedIn, but some aren't as active as others. And I think a mistake can be that if we're not that active on social, then it doesn't matter as much. But you can guarantee that at least one of your customers will be active on social media, and if they're posting about you, you need to be aware of that. So I think, as we said before, sort of having that speed of response definitely in the social media age, and being able to monitor those channels effectively. So if you are aware of something that could be hitting, setting up your social listening, being, monitoring those channels, seeing which, keywords that you want to be monitoring for is definitely really important.
Yeah, I agree. I think Sarah makes a great point, and especially in the age of social media, a crisis really can come from anywhere. It might not be a call into your press office from a journalist anymore. It could be someone walking into your reception. It could be someone posting on Trustpilot. It could be absolutely anything and everywhere. And you've got to be aware of what people are saying about you, and also have that process, whether that's familiar to your social media team, familiar to any public-facing reception, customer service people. Everyone has to be aware of that crisis process so that things can be escalated, because crises can come from anywhere.
Fabulous. So we often remember the bad, I can't say the word, crises, and we often, the ones that kind of go slightly off piste often become a lovely case study, or actually make it onto your PR morning chats of did you see that yesterday?
We'll save that for the crisis training program.
Yes. The one that I did love the way they handled it was obviously that Coldplay situation, where they ended up recruiting Gwyneth to kind of be the face of the company, raise awareness of the company itself, try and bring the conversation, the narrative back to them, but in a very tongue-in-cheek way, whilst kind of giving a nod to the the HR and CEO situation. But are there any examples of where you've thought, do you know what, they've handled that so well? Mike, if I come to you first.
Yeah, I think perhaps putting my politics hat back on, and perhaps not all my colleagues will agree, but actually the recent issue with the OBR releasing their sort of forecast ahead of the budget rather than after it was a mess. There's no avoiding that. And obviously led to the downfall of the CEO. But ultimately, they did handle it quite well, I thought, in the immediate aftermath. There was a lot of misinformation. Did someone leak it deliberately? Was it political? Was it a foreign actor doing it? And they managed to quash that quite quickly by investigating and getting the information out quite quickly. Obviously, they were under a lot of pressure, but it just shows that if you let things go on, often they can get far worse. And if you're just quick to address them, say it was a mistake, here's exactly what happened, and be transparent, often you can avoid crises becoming worse.
That's such a good example, because like 10 seconds after it happened, my immediate thought was, this is intentional. This is a disgruntled employee. But they got a handle on it and they kind of said, look, human error straight away. So that's a really good example. Sarah, have you got an example?
Yeah, I think, as you say, it's about really trying to take control of the story. And I think one is it's going back a few years ago now, but it's when KFC ran out of chicken. Which is obviously quite a crucial ingredient for KFC. And obviously that hit the press, that hit social media, but they were very upfront in not blaming their supply chain and putting their hands up and saying, we're sorry. And a bit like the Coldplay example that they did it with, it fit their brand to do it with a bit of self-deprecating humour as well. So they took out the full page ads and they changed the logo to FCK and just said, we're sorry, we put our hands up. And that is one that's been seen to be sort of the bastion of crisis communications. But obviously dealing with stuff with humour is not appropriate for everybody. If you're dealing with a big crisis, you can't sort of go, we're just here for the lols or anything like that. That's not going to be appropriate. So you mentioned earlier sort of about M&S and their cyber attack as sort of a more recent one that obviously, not great for them at all, but actually they've been quite widely praised by comms professionals in terms of how they handled it. They were very transparent. They were very honest. They regularly communicated with customers as well. And I think that's such a key thing for crisis comms is just to, you say, not hide behind things and be honest and transparent. And put if it's you've done it, you need to put your hands up and admit it as well. And quickly. Yeah.
Fabulous.
Thank you. It's been such great information shared, but I've got one final question. For organisations that aren't in the spotlight right now, the ones who are not having a PR crisis, and especially thinking about those in the energy or regulated sectors where things can escalate very, very quickly and become very serious. What is the one thing you would say to them that they should be thinking about right now, proactively, to prepare for a situation which might just come round and hit them tomorrow?
Well, I mean, to hark back to Aston Villa and being prepared, and I must apologise to my husband if he's listening, because I should mention West Brom at this point as well, who are going through their own crisis, who are not prepared. But anyway, I think, just, without wishing to sort of bang that drum, it is about being prepared that crisis, yes, by their nature are very, very reactive, but if you are prepared, if you know your escalation process, then you are getting ahead of it. And as Mike said, before you are responding quickly, you're not letting other people sort of fill that void. So I think sort of my number one thing is just be prepared, have those plans in place and run those scenarios, because those can change as well. That a scenario last year might not be a scenario this year. So yeah, just make sure you're really refreshing those plans as well.
I think preparedness is the key word here, but I remember being taught that reputation should be sort of treated a bit like a health and safety issue. We've got to the point now where sort of health and safety is everyone's responsibility and everyone has to report it if there's a risk or a trip hazard. And it should be a bit like that with reputational risk. Everyone in your company should know the escalation process, because this whole idea of crises can come from anywhere, should know how to escalate things up so that things reach the press office or your comms people quickly and sort of don't get left to turn into a big issue. It's sort of treating reputation a bit like health and safety. It's something that needs to be managed. It's something that everyone should be aware of how to handle it.
Wonderful. Well, I think that is a good place to leave it today. But if there's one thing this conversation shows, is that a crisis doesn't usually arrive with a siren. It tends to turn up, especially in our space, as an email, a comment or a Passager subject header. And we all should be more Aston Villa or more Scouts and just be prepared. And for B2B brands, especially in energy and regulated sectors, being quietly confident isn't quite the same as being prepared. So Sarah, Mike, thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
We hope you've enjoyed this episode of the Marketing Podcast. Be sure to check out marketingpod.com for more of the latest B2B marketing discussions.
Or if this episode has really resonated with you and you'd like to discuss this topic in more detail, please get in touch. We'd love to hear from you.